talked about these theoretical buyers and what all these buyers are looking for in these businesses. Travis, why don't you give a little bit of insight as to where do we find the buyers for these businesses?
So it's from our database. Found me either on the website, through IBBA, Tab, some like they're out searching for brokers. So we develop a large database of buyers just from that. And so we can hit thousands of people immediately. Conferences we attend, social events we attend, because we're around, bankers all the time who are representing buyers.
Welcome to the Expert Exchange, the podcast where knowledge meets success, with your host, Joshua Carnes, and expert guests, Travis Strack. Today's show is brought to you by Lion Business Advisors.
The content in this show is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. The Expert Exchange is not a fiduciary by virtue of any person's use of or access to this content. The Expert Exchange is not licensed to practice law or provide legal advice. Nothing contained within this show is intended to be an offer to either buy or sell securities.
Welcome to the Expert Exchange, the podcast where knowledge meets success. I'm your host, Josh Carnes, and on today's show, we are going to be diving into what buyers look for besides profits and other topics on getting your business ready to sell. On today's show, we're going to be doing that with expert guest Travis Strack. Travis, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, Travis, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us a little about yourself and what you got going on.
Yeah, so I'm a M&A advisor with Lion Business Brokers. I'm actually based out of Fort Worth, Texas, but cover the DFW Metroplex and actually other states, throughout the country. So I've been doing it about 5 years, and been working with some really good companies and buyers, and actually working with private equity firms now that they've taken a look at lower markets and diving into M&A stuff.
Perfect.
At Lion Business Advisors, selling a business is not just a transaction. You've poured your heart and soul into your business. It's not just a paycheck, it's your legacy. The team at Lion Business Advisors is here to guide you through the process, ensuring your successful exit. Contact the team at Lion Business Advisors at 800-525-3542. That's 800-525-3542, or visit us at lionbusinessadvisors.com. Lion Business Advisors. Let the story of your next chapter begin with us.
All right, so let's dive into it. So again, today's show is going to be, what do business buyers look for besides profits, right? And I think it's a pretty common question that we get being in the industry. So what are some of those external value drivers that will drive the value of a business? I thought all businesses just go off of a multiple of cash flow or revenue, right?
Right. Well, yeah, when you talk to buyers, that's what you hear a lot of times is just only willing to pay like a multiple, 2x, 3x, 4x, and that's kind of where the conversation stops, right? But truthfully, there's so many other factors to look into, besides that and just the gross profit. So external drivers, like you say, Josh, that can be anything like, think about location, think about a small like candy store, something like that. Of course, you want that somewhere where there's going to be a ton of foot traffic and people walking by to pop in and out of the shop. So that's, again, something that we would call an external driver.
Okay. What are some of those top value drivers that buyers look for when they're going to take on a business?
Well, on top of like the one just said, like location, that's one, of course, that will be viewed. The other things like operating systems. So, say it's a manufacturing facility and, of course, you want to look at their systems in place, standard operating procedures in place, technology in place. A lot of manufacturing companies now have the scan barcode that can track, product from beginning to end just by scanning the barcode. So that's one of the things they will look for. Also, clean financials. Believe it or not, doesn't even depend on the size of the company. We run into it all the time where, you come in and somebody has QuickBooks, but the question is, how accurate is it? And on the even worst case scenario, they don't have QuickBooks and they're doing stuff with handwritten general ledgers. And as odd as that may seem, in 2024, I'm currently working with a business owner that has everything done on handwritten general ledgers. So it's not,
Right.
yeah, to say that it doesn't happen these days, because it's still out there, and the importance of being able to pull reports for potential buyers. Again, they're going to look at the financials. They want to be able to see a P&L and a balance sheet pulled quickly, and not something that takes a week or two to gather the information.
Perfect. So what are some of the things that give a business a strong market position in today when they're trying to go to sell?
Well, it could be a few things. One, it could be a niche type of industry. It's different when you're in an industry that you're competing with 100 other companies that within a 50-mile square radius. If you have a particular industry or company that really is one only like a few in the country, say,
Mhm.
then you're going to have a very strong market position, because the people, if say you're a supplier, the companies that need those supplies and that product, can only reach out to, say, three different companies in the country. So right there, that would put you in a super strong market position.
Okay. What about location? Does location come into play for businesses?
Yeah. So, the foot traffic one's pretty obvious. That's pretty common sense, but take a little bit closer look at that, and say we'll use the manufacturing company like we're talking about earlier. You don't want to pay for property like in downtown Fort Worth or downtown Dallas to put a manufacturing plant. And then, because, that lease is going to be super expensive if you're leasing it, or if you're an owner trying to sell it, no one really wants to pay that premium for that property if they just want a manufacturing company, or pay that high lease. So things like that, the manufacturing, for example, like I said, you want that farther out, more of a large footprint, cheaper lease, cheaper property if you're purchasing it. And of course, people don't even think about things like different costs for like parking for your employees. So, that in a location, that's like a large scale. I'm out here in Fort Worth. We have tons of land, and you see distribution centers going up left and right, up and down I-35. And it's because the property's there, and it's positions them well, because also location, depending on what they're in, manufacturing, supplier, they're close to an airport. That's very important for somebody in that industry.
What about like retail businesses and smaller mom and pop shops? Does location matter for them?
Yeah. So when you're looking at that, say a mom and pop shop put in a retail business 20 years ago, small downtown area or somewhere, local, not much built up around it, good location, had some good traffic. But since then, the area has kind of deteriorated, went downhill. Maybe some kind of shady business, a liquor store went in next door, some other things that, maybe you wouldn't want your kids next to or buy in that area. So what would have been a prime location 20 years ago, now is not so much. And so you've got to look at all the aspects. Again, there's so much more to look at versus just the gross profit.
Yeah. So you hit earlier on systems and operating and ledgers. So do buyers look at operating systems or businesses procedures and manuals when they take that into consideration?
They should. They definitely should. And even if it's more of a simple business, the thing I consult with sellers too is to get, even on a basic level, just some kind of standard operating procedures in place, because what buyers should be looking for, and again, there's a caveat to this, is the buyer looking for a job, or are they looking for investment and to kind of be more hands-off, have a good general manager in place, let the kind of company run itself day to day, and they see it from a higher level. But at the end of the day, they want a turnkey business, even if they are buying a job. That way they can step right into it. They have the procedures in place. They can refer to them, as far as they move forward. So yeah, I think it's highly needed. And, technology is your friend, these days. Yeah. Again, we're in 2024. And if you're not utilizing technology to help, track your marketing efforts, your sales efforts, your production line, in my opinion, you're already behind the curve on that, because your competitors are doing that, which is helping to lower their cost. They can offer the product at a more of a discounted rate. And so, yeah, I think it's truly important.
What about that 30-year-old business that never came into the technology sector, never adopted business processes and systems? Should they hold off selling to get that stuff in place, or should they just go to market?
I would suggest that they, spend the next year or two getting those systems implemented. That way it's in place 2 years down the road. If they, again, if they have the time, there's no health concerns, nothing that the clock's ticking on. So it'd be well worth their time. I mean, again, we're talking about multiple, but
yeah,
if you get a premium and you go from maybe getting a 2.5 multiple to potentially, you could get up to like a 4, that's a lot of money that you can gain, just with investing 2 years of your time and effort.
How does a business's market stability affect a buyer's evaluation process?
Well, and I'm going to back up real quick, Josh. I just thought of a point back to your first question. I'll get to this one. I was going to say, if they need the money, the other thing that the seller can do is sell at a discounted rate.
Yeah.
Again, buyers should be savvy about this, what they're walking into. And again, if the technology is not there, they are kind of walking into a little bit of I don't want to say problem, but a headache, maybe a little bit of a hurdle that they have to take their own money and invest into to get that technology in place. So the seller should be understandable that, they're going to get a lower offer. Again, this is that scenario if they just need the money, they need to get out, health issues, whatever, but to expect a lower offer if those systems aren't in place.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things too, where we talk to sellers and you go, hey, if there is a problem with the business and you need to exit today, just be honest about what that problem is. And then you can go to market and find a buyer who believes they can fix that problem. Right. You're not going to get as high as multiple, but if you know what the issue is, you can find a buyer who believes they can fix it and you can still get a transaction done. Right.
And it really comes down to the relationship with the seller. Me on the broker side, the M&A side, I'll easily walk away from a deal or a potential listing if I don't feel like the seller and I are on the same page. Or I just had one the other day. Seller had a number in mind that they wanted to sell for, and they were adamant about it. Mm-hmm. And now I'm not one to say it couldn't happen, but it's most likely not going to happen, or it's going to take an extended period of time, just to find that one buyer that is just the perfect fit and is willing to pay that. And so from my standpoint, that's just ones that, if you can't work with that seller and really get the information you need and really have them be realistic, about, what's going to happen once you get the LOI, then once you get the purchase agreement, the negotiation phase, the seller has to be willing to give a little bit, to take a little bit, right? It's just that give and take. It's the negotiation. And, when they're just draw the line in the sand, that's what I'm like, I'm not the guy for you.
Yeah, I think it's important for sellers to understand that this is not real estate, right? So business transactions is not real estate. There's a lot of correlation and it gets wrapped in a lot of times, but you cannot go to market with a set, exact to the penny price in hand. Businesses sell in a range, and sometimes that's a wide range. And so you really do, as a business owner, if you're going to sell your business, you got to be open to negotiate and understand a best case scenario, you end up at one spot, and a worst case scenario, you end up at one spot. And the goal is to end up on the plus side of wherever the middle of that is, right? So
right. Well, and you bring up a good point, Josh. I mean, we do get kind of tagged with, just kind of like real estate type thing. And as you mentioned, there's some tidbits that are, kind of go hand in hand, but it's really a totally different sell. And again, because when you buy a house, we're talking about from the buy side, I mean, it's a set asset, it's just right there. You can go see it, touch it, feel it, have it inspected, have the walls inspected, have everything, the foundation inspected. When you're buying a business, there's a lot of things you can't see and feel and touch.
Yeah.
And that's therefore where the risk comes in, right? I mean, so, when you buy a house, there is, some risk, something wasn't disclosed, but for the most part, again, you've done your due diligence by doing the inspections and the walkthroughs. When you buy a business, You don't really know how the employees are going to take it with the new owner. Are they going to stay? Are they going to leave? There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that if a seller isn't ready and willing to kind of work through some of those obstacles and those questions, then again, the buyer and the seller, we're just going to get too far apart because they have to be addressed during the due diligence process, and the seller has to be open to do that.
Perfect. So you kind of hit on it, and we'll jump around, but you talk about the process, the diligence process, and all of that. What is the average time on market, or what's the average time you're seeing right now to get a deal done from the time a seller goes, you know what, Travis, I'm ready to sell, let's go to market, to the time that they actually get a check in their hand and are walking away to Cabo?
Yeah, well, it could ideally be around, anywhere from 9 to 12 months. Mm-hmm. But a little side note for me, again, setting the expectations for the seller, I just straight up tell them it's going to be a year. Just factor in a year of your life that we're going to be pulling paperwork, doing financials, doing walkthroughs, site visits, once we get to the due diligence stage, right? And they have to be open and willing to do that. If they're like, no, I want to sell this within 3 months or so. Mm-hmm. Back to my point about if they have unrealistic expectations, I'm not going to be part of that deal. They have to be on board to stick it out. And it can even go, past 12 months. That it's not unheard of, because you may get to the point you're at the year mark and you've got a, LOI, you finished up the quality of earnings. You're basically now the buyer's attorneys are drafting the purchase agreement. You're at that final stage, but it may float because then there may be some financing issues on the buy side. They're still, so we're all queued up on what we need to do for the due diligence, quality of earnings, but now we're waiting on the bank, to approve the loan. So the buyer's still going through some processes with the bank that may push it out another 30 days. I've seen it even 60 days. So the seller just has to be willing, to wait that out. And again, since we are talking about buyers and what they have to do the same. Yeah. You're not going to walk right in, typically, not saying it can't happen, but walk right in and put money down and, as a deposit, and then start going through that and walk out with a brand new business, a short amount of time. It is a process. That's
deal fatigue is a real thing that doesn't get spoken about a lot in this industry of this is not a quick process. You're not going to market and selling your business and being done in 30 days.
Right. Well, and so you think about that time frame, that's a long time. Mm-hmm. And for a business to run, right? So a business is running that year, and you'll have fluctuations in a business every quarter. So think about that, and I'm dealing with an issue, right? I don't want to call it issue, but it's just business. It's just running, the business just running through its cycles. And, we've got purchase agreement in hand. We're at that final stage. Mm-hmm. Again, because full disclosure on our side to the buy side, the owner lost a fairly sizable account. It's not, more than, 5%, 10%, nothing like that. But it is something that we have to disclose to the buy side. So then now we're back into going back through, now looking at the new numbers, and then, projecting what does that look like, and anything that we have new on the pipeline, in the pipeline for new clients and products. So again, we were about to close in a week. That's the stage we were at. And again, I'm saying this to set the expectations for both. Again, buyers, sellers, everyone in this, that things can change. I think in our industry, you can probably justify this too, that we've always heard like the deal will die like 3 times, during the process. Might have just little things like this. And die, it slows down. Now we got to go back and reevaluate, do other things. A key employee was lost. It is a process, and it's just constant. You got to still with it. So I like, deal fatigue is a great way to put it.
Yep. Just kind of hit on this, losing a client. So how can market stability affect a buyer's valuation process?
Oh, it's another big one, because again, we'll take seasonal work, right? Mm-hmm. Seasonal, some people look for those. They just want something that's, going to be open, during the warm months of the summer. Those can be a little tricky too, because you're just getting revenue, for 4 to 6 months out of the year. And
yeah.
So they're not necessarily a bad thing, because if you look back at their financials and their history over the last 5 years, And for each of those 4 to 6 months, they're hitting the same number, or slightly, hopefully, ideally, slightly trending upwards each year. That's a pretty safe seasonal business, right? But if you look back in the 5 years and see it scattered all over, like some really lows, a high point, but then back to mid, then back to a low point, those can be risky. And they're more so because, again, with it seasonal, you only have that 4 to 6 months. You don't have 12 months to really, turn it around if you lost a client, to get another new one back, to get the revenue flowing. So market stability is huge. Now, taking just a true calendar year company, again, manufacturing is just an easy one to utilize and represent. Again, if they have that niche market and they have the clientele, again, for something like that I'm sure they probably had that same clientele for 10 years, 15 years. Buyers should be wary of, so-called new accounts. They come in to look at a business and, oh yeah, this new account is bringing in 35% of our revenue now. We just got on as a great close. That's great, but there's no history to see how stable that new client's going to be. Are they going to be around for the year 2, year 3, year 4? So there is some risk of that. So, a seller may look at that as, look at this great client we got at, right? Which is good. The revenue's up, but the buyer should and will be looking at, okay, but how do I know if that client will be around, next year? Can I factor in that revenue versus, say, the 5 other clients they've had, on the books for the last 5 or 10 years?
Yeah. I don't think we kind of hit about this, but if you're on the internet at all today, you see all these TikTok videos and all that stuff saying buying boring businesses or buying interesting businesses. So how does it come into play for a buyer when they're looking at industries that are companies that have taken a unique look at their industry? Or is it better to buy an interesting business or a boring business, or where does that lie in with what you're doing?
I mean, I think a buyer is going to be more intrigued with an interesting business, right? I mean, because again, it's those businesses you hear about that are kind of breaking the mold, right? They're maybe taking a different look at how things have been done and coming about it, a different way, which again could be more cost effective, more marketable. I mean, we haven't talked about marketing and marketability of a business and a company. Again, talking about, different drivers, which we can touch on that later because I have an example on that one too. But I mean, the interesting ones, and maybe it's personal because they always interest me. I mean, it's like coming in and seeing how somebody's really doing something different. We've been doing the same thing year over year. And then it's one of those light bulb moments like, oh, well, why didn't anyone think about this a long time ago? So I think the interesting ones can, bring more of a value driver because, again, everything else has just been kind of tried and true. Now, there may be a little bit more risk, in that, right? They don't have as long as a history and a record. But in investing, as people know, there is risk in investments. And sometimes the greater the risk, the greater reward. So, I mean, yeah, I think the interesting ones that factor can bring a higher value.
And I think it goes back to businesses sell in a range. There is no set asking price for a type of business. So if you can carve off a niche within an industry, so I think interesting is kind of a loose term. So if you look at HVAC companies, right? Theoretically a boring business, but over the last few years, a lot of HVAC companies have installed a model to where they're doing monthly service payments and things like that. That's new, and it's showing substantial, guaranteed income over time, and it's new and it's niche-y, and that can make a business interesting. So you can be in a niche and be interesting in traditional industries that have been around forever. So.
Right. And that kind of ties into the marketability. To your point, it doesn't have to be the actual product and the process, but just how they've attacked the market, how they're going after the market share. And think about, so HVAC and some of those service industries, some of these creative commercials you see on TV that are run. I mean, that song and stuff is stuck in your head and, you just recognize who they are, and that's from their marketing. Right. And so they've attacked, whereas maybe, more standard people just do the newspaper ad back when newspapers or, magazine, some online Google stuff. But, these are people are going out, and to your point about TikTok, doing videos. I mean, video things are huge now. So people are kind of breaking out of that mold and doing video advertisements.
Yeah.
And to kind of roll back to the marketability thing I was talking about, as far as, the drivers, it can be looked at. We touched on technology and processes and systems. So yeah, not having those, can hurt you. Definitely. Yeah. We've kind of touched on that and talked about it, but sometimes even not having those, if you're just the type of industry you're in and the potential buyer you're working with, if they're tech savvy and, and basically a business, I'll give you an example. I have one right now. He has no internet presence at all. And doesn't market, doesn't do any sales. All his business is done by referrals. He cash flows very, very well. And it's like, he doesn't hire any more techs. He's got enough business he wants. He doesn't want to, take it to the next level. So, we're working with a private equity firm that, sees where this thing can go and how quickly they could scale it. Yeah. Because he's currently turning away business. And so that's an example of, a company that doesn't have any technology in place, marketing in place, no systems. There's no CRM. I mean, he's not tracking, clients and leads and follow-up calls. So I just throw that out there, that there is sometimes a catch-22 to everything. It's nothing just, set in stone, like it's going to be a lower value. This one, we actually got to hire just because it cash flows well, and they can easily, within a year, start scaling it, bring on a few more techs, some equipment. They're going to ramp it up.
No, and to that extent too, I think that goes back to a little bit of the prep work that you, meaning Travis, does as an advisor, because there's a lot of people who are going to instantly discount that, but you made a boring business interesting to the right buyer to leverage for a higher thing. So, if you are looking at selling your business, I know we're a little jaded here in the plug that I'm about to give, but using an advisor can definitely pull you up and pull you through some of the things that could be a discount into a positive, because people like Travis know how to get the right business in front of the right buyer to pay for the maximum amount. So,
thank you. Yeah. And it's key.
Yeah. So, we're talking about value drivers and what buyers look for besides profits. But earlier you hit on clean financials versus someone using like a daily ledger or something like that. So what do you mean clean financials? What is it? It's a buyer's looking at financials, but clean financials is something different.
Yeah. Well, again, I got another prime example for you, Josh, in currently happening. So, so clean financials, for one, like we talked about, just the very basics, have a accounting system in place. QuickBooks, there's some other ones out there, but everyone knows QuickBooks. At the very basic, having a QuickBooks system in place, and importantly, somebody who knows how to use it. And that's where I'm at now with this kind of what we're dealing with on this other listing I have. So they do use QuickBooks at just for invoicing. Okay. And just some, basic filing. Well, digging into the financials. And again, we have an offer on the table. This one's a cash offer, and so we can close quickly, and we're at the kind of 2 weeks out point. Come to find out, we're pulling together some, basic financial information at the very end. And so we asked for the sales tax returns, and the sales tax returns weren't matching up with what the bank statement showed for income. Sales tax returns were off, from the income statements, about 20,000 in some months.
It's huge.
And it's instances. And so that's a huge red flag. And so now we're at the point where we've got to, put on the brakes on the deal that was going to potentially close in a couple of weeks. We've got to go back and make sure this is cleaned up. And again, that's what I mean by knowing somebody who knows how to use it. What we think happened so far as we're digging into this, the office manager who was inputting everything was calculating somehow wrong and putting in the numbers. So, on the saying goes, crap in, crap out. I mean, so they were getting crap data out because the lady was putting in the wrong information. And so now we're at a stopping point until we get this cleaned up, and, it could take some time.
The reality is, if you don't have your financials in order, which is kind of where we're going with clean financials, at some point you're going to have to reconcile that in the process. And so you just have to deal with it at some point, right? And so now it's cost you a little bit of time and potentially a little bit of money if those numbers don't come back right.
Right. And that's the whole point of due diligence. I mean, that's why this stuff comes up, and it may be something that sellers kind of forgot about a couple years ago, but at the end of the day, we should find it, or it should be discovered somehow. Because that's the point, is we want to find anything that's maybe a concern. Even if I'm representing the seller, right? I'm the intermediary. So I'm trying to look out for both parties, that we're exchanging true and accurate data between the parties. And so it's my job to be there and do that and make sure that happens. And that's back to your point about, having an advisor, because not only do you, like I say, get basically a listing agent in a sense that, hey, we're listing you, we're out marketing your company. But then during times like this and through due diligence, then, you're also getting an intermediary that basically does all the work between both parties. I typically don't even let my buyer and seller, talk. I mean, especially the early stages, meetings, on-site meetings, that's different. But, I'm gathering data in between and mitigating those conversations and kind of keeping them focused and productive.
No, it's interesting, because I like to tell people, I'm a little blunt when it comes to it, but I tell people diligence is the process where that buyer is looking for a reason, A, not to buy, or B, renegotiate. And if you weren't honest up front, it's going to come out in diligence. It never doesn't come out. It always comes out, and it can kill the deal or push time or something like that. And so our job as an advisor is to find out as much information as we can so that there are no surprises in diligence, so that we have a fair offer from the get and all of that, because just like this, it will come out, and either time or price will change, or you'll even have buyers walk away if it's too big of a surprise.
Yeah. Well, on top of that, talking about clean financials and systems in place to really pull data quickly. To your point is that then we can pull those reports at the forefront, before we start engaging these buyers, and we can discover any of these kind of questionable items, or, the ones that ask CPA, right? The infamous ask CPA why that $75,000 was for. Then you dig in, you find out it's for the daughter's pool. Oh, okay. Well, we've got to account for that, and so, and again, I bring that up because the one with the sales tax return issue is the company that doesn't really use QuickBooks. It's general ledgers. And I mean, you're talking stacks of just handwritten forms to sort through. And so again, that's the other benefit with the system in place, accurate data in place. You can get a good picture of what's going on and, address any issues right up front.
Perfect. So, you're talking about diligence and buyers and sellers coming together. What are some good terms that a seller can offer a buyer, or a buyer can offer a seller? Like, what should a seller expect as far as a deal? Are these, it's not all cash up front 100% of the time, right?
No, it's rarely that. And again, that's one of my ears perk up, when the seller, if I'm meeting with them to, learn about their business, see if we want to list them or if it's a good potential listing, is the ones, again, that kind of draw that hard line of like, well, it's just cash. It's worth this much. I just clean and simple, black and white, just cash at close. And again, that's just not the case. I mean, that's not the norm. A buyer, and they shouldn't. We talked about, the difference between real estate and buying a business. There's a lot of risk that goes into buying a business. So the buyer wants the seller to have some skin in the game, to make sure they're going to be there to help, the transition. If they have questions or issues, to be there to support them, and ask questions. And so, they're going to typically ask for, some seller financing. Okay. So seller financing is very common. I mean, it's just almost always a given.
Yeah.
And even banks like that too, right? So as part of their loan process, sometimes they're like, oh, if we can get, even sometimes it's as low as $50,000 seller finance. Just they want something in to see as part of the deal. What a lot of sellers don't really think about is earnouts.
Yeah.
And that's usually used again where, the seller wants X amount, the buyer's only willing to pay this amount, even with some seller financing, but we're stuck, right? We're off 100,000 or whatever. And so an earnout is a way for the buyer to kind of write that language in, that if the company, again, back to the risk thing, if the company meets certain criteria and certain levels, then that seller will be entitled to that earnout. Again, we'll choose 100,000. If they hit certain criteria at end of year one, then the earnout's paid to the seller. If not, then the earnout's not paid. Then there's no $100,000. And I've even seen them where they scale them down. If it's not 100%, it's this. If it's 90 or 80, it's this. And they scale it down versus just nothing. And so sellers have to be, aware of that as well, that they have to be open to doing those types of things to get the deal done. It's just common.
I think the other thing that sellers miss out on too, up until the last moment, is generally when you speak to sellers, they want all cash. But when you start looking at the tax implications of getting $5 million cash in one day for the sale of your business, sometimes that seller financing and those earnouts all of a sudden are the most attractive thing and the best thing for you long term. My kind of go-to with Line and with our clients is to look at the offer in its entirety and just be open, right? Because you really don't know what the best offer is, because $1 million in all cash versus $2 million in seller financing. Well, $2 million is double, but if it's all 100% seller financing, that's probably not a great deal. So I really encourage sellers to just be open, be negotiable, and look at the offer in its entirety, right? It's everything down to, are they asking the seller to stick around for a year? And do you want to stick around for a year? Or are they telling you to move on, right? Sometimes it's a positive, sometimes it's a negative. You just really never know until you get into the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah. And that's it's back to the point of just being really upfront with the seller and set their expectations, kind of, hey, if you do this, if we do this, this is kind of some things we're going to have to, address and, deal with in the negotiation phase.
Yeah.
Because again, to your point, seller financing, they look at it as a bad thing. The seller, buyer is a good thing, but seller's like, that's money out of my pocket. But you break it down, again, it helps with their taxes. They're not getting hit on such a large tax income as far as their immediate income. It draws it out. Plus you're getting interest rate on it, and they don't really see it. And I've had to break it down and write it out to see that. And then it even goes, we're getting too far into it, but then how the deal is, it an asset sale or like a membership, purchase agreement, taxed differently, and so, and you just got to kind of walk through these sellers. And I think my belief has always been the more educated and more information I can give them up front, the less of the headbutting we'll have when we're in the thick of the deal, and I don't want the seller to say, well, you didn't tell me that, or I didn't know about that, and now that's what's being offered. And I've had to say, we did talk about that, and I have an email that shows that, we brought that up, and hey, are you open to this? And so, to your point, just be open-minded. Yeah. And the offer and that, it's just a starting phase. And then you work into where, I tell everyone I work with on the buy side and the sell side is, I look at my job as the goal is just to make it to where both parties walk away from the deal feeling like they got a good deal. Like somebody like, oh, I screwed them over. I got the shaft, I got taken advantage of. Because again, that's all you're trying to do is work to a middle ground to where both parties are happy. Yeah. And they can walk away.
You hit on something, and I think it's actually a big problem in our industry, but I think you personally do exceptionally well at it, is setting sellers' expectation for what this process really looks like. And if a seller does not fully understand about what they're about to dive into, it can be a really long, drawn out and not fun process. But if the seller has full expectations of, I'm not going to get an exact number, this is going to be a range, this is going to be a negotiation, there's going to be some give and take. I think the experience for the seller is a lot more comfortable. It's not the shock and awe at a low offer. It's not the shock and awe of some seller financing, things like that. And so on a side note, I think you do exceptionally well of setting up your clients for success in the beginning so that the transaction can actually have the wherewithal to go through.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, I think some in the industry has gotten us like where they just want the listing, right? Yeah. And the listing fee that's, accompanies that, and then on to the next one. And it's kind of like a numbers game. And I guess I'm a little different, is more focused and strategic on, I want to take on a listing that one, I know I can sell, or, very confident I can sell. And again, I have a good rapport with the seller that we can work through any issues. Their demeanor is good, where, if the buyer gets a little out of hand or, forward, that we can call it. And I tell sellers all the time, like, trust me, it would all be nice at the front. Everyone's cordial, even to the LOI stage, then due diligence starts and we're getting closer, and then purchase agreement. And then, we start getting stuff in writing. Right. Yep. And you'll probably be offended about some of the things, meaning like, I'm only going to offer this much for this. I've got to account for this. I'm going to back this out. And so I said, it's just a negotiation. And again, our goal is to get to a middle ground, and we can get creative. I mean, I worked one the other day, like the guy, he didn't want earn out, but so we worked in a thing on the back end, again, back to where he got some kind of bonus structure. It wasn't a true earn out, but then he got some commission, like on any new accounts that he helped refer to the new buyer moving forward. Cause again, he's been in the industry 30 years. He has tons of contacts. So they're like, okay, well, but to compensate you for, any efforts you want to help moving, because again, it's ideal for him to help the business grow too. He has employees he wants taken care of. That they said, even any referrals you give us, anything we close, we do make, you get a percentage at the end of the year. So, I mean, again, that's what sellers need to understand, that you can get really creative as long as the buyers open that too. And they're just not, cut and dry and doing a, template purchase agreement.
Perfect. So, we've been spending most of our time talking about what buyers look for besides just a pure profit number. So if a business owner is stuck with us this far and they're sitting here going, man, Travis, this is pretty interesting. I think I might want to sell my business. When is the best time for a business owner to sell their business?
Well, I think I have to be careful how I answer that. Because again, until I see what's going on in the business, and I think we mentioned it earlier, if I'm walking in and talking to an owner that is on the up and up, all these systems, accounting systems in place, production, if it's manufacturing, production systems in place, good employees, long-term accounts, if all that, a lot of those boxes check off and they're very positive cash flow, kind of a turnkey business, then I would say now. Strike while the iron's hot. At least put it out there, and see what happens. Again, once we do evaluation and they're comfortable with the range. Again, you mentioned the range that we do. And again, there's a low end and a high end. And I always tell the sellers, like, I need you to be comfortable with the low end too. I mean, just if we get to that point, are you comfortable with that? Or is there a cutoff point? If so, let me know where that's at, because I may not know if I can get us there, so it's one of those. But if it's like one of those businesses, list it now, because I think we've talked about, you never know. COVID, for example, prime example, you're running on 8 cylinders and probably everything's great. All these things are in place. Probably wait a year or two to sell. And then a pandemic happens, right? And, say you're in the service industry and boom, so stuff like that can happen. The flip side of that, I would say, if I get into a business and see some of these things popping their head up that aren't in place, then I would probably say, you know what, how about let's do a target for 2 years down the road, 2 or 3 years, and start implementing some processes. I can work with you. We have contacts in the industry that's all they do. Their job is to work with business owners as management consultants, go into business, reduce their costs, increase their profits, and some, high enough to even where they can bring on a general manager without even, taking a hit. And so putting them in contact with some of those people and those folks, and then get them propped up, because again, when they sell, you want to get the highest dollar amount, right? And again, if they're at some of these things where they have issues, they're not going to get the highest dollar. I mean, again, it's back to all those questions. Do you need to sell now, right? Is there a health issue? Is somebody dealing with cancer or something like that? Okay, that's a whole different scenario, right? Then we'll attack it, and if we think we can sell it, we will. But yeah, I mean, but if you're thinking about it, you need to put a lot more thought into it, not just I just thought about it. Really put some effort into either listing it, talking to an advisor like myself or anyone else, and getting the feel for what that would really be like. Or again, taking the steps to make your business more attractive to more buyers.
The other piece I'll hit on that is kind of the opposite side of don't wait too long to sell your business, right? So one of the saddest things that I hear throughout the years of doing this is a business owner who calls up and goes, well, I was thinking about retiring, so I started winding down the business to make it easier to offload. And, you see these mom and pop, quote unquote, businesses that worked for 30 plus years, had great businesses, did, $1.5, $2, $3 million in revenue for years on years on years. And then the owner's like, well, I got tired, so I just started taking on less business. That is not the way to exit. That is going to lead in the business just closing down and moving on, or getting a very low offer. Buyers don't care what you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yep.
Buyers care what is happening in the business today. And, we're not in the tech bubble where they are going to pay you for future pie in the sky potential. They're going to pay for what the business is doing today. So if you're considering about selling, every business owner exits at some point, right? Whether it be handing off to a family member, death, or something crazy, every business owner exits. So start thinking about it. And I think Travis hit it on the sweet spot. If your business is doing great and things are going great, it's probably the time to really start thinking about selling, because a buyer wants to buy great cash flows and a great business that's running smoothly. They don't want to buy the problem child. Now, there are buyers out there who buy the problem children, but they are not giving you a premium on that business.
Pennies on the dollar is what they'll offer. Yep. And you made a point too, Josh, let's throw in there. We're talking about market stability that we touched on earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I would also suggest that sellers, you kind of gave an example of the 1 in 30 years, but sellers should also keep a pulse on what the market is doing.
Mm-hmm.
I had a company probably 3 years ago. They were in the paper industry, paper publishing industry. Been same scenarios as yours, family business passed on down and down, generation. And of course, online marketing, online everything, digital PDF, like they just slowly were bled dry.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 years ago, I was like, there's still something here. We can maybe get some, but if you keep waiting any longer, this is just going to get worse and worse for you. And it's just going to be a liquidated sale. You're going to sell all the assets in the building. And so I would also suggest, that, sellers and business owners really keep a pulse on what the market's doing and kind of where it's going. Where is it headed? And are they ready for that?
Mm-hmm.
Back to the systems in place. If not, start, purchasing, implementing some of those systems, but it can really, really hurt you if you're not.
So as we kind of start to wrap up here, we talked about these theoretical buyers and what all these buyers are looking for in these businesses. Travis, why don't you give a little bit of insight as to where do we find the buyers for these businesses?
So it's from our database. I can speak for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Get hit up weekly, from interested buyers who found me either on the website, through IBBA, Tab, some guy, they're out searching for brokers. So we develop a large database of buyers just from that. We also, once we have a listing and stuff, we post it on all the major portals, all of them. It goes to out there, Biz Buy Sell and everything that's tied into it, LoopNet. And so we can hit thousands of people immediately. Then it's also through basically conferences we attend, social events we attend because we're around, bankers all the time
Mhm.
who are representing buyers. And, like we've been at events and a banker has somebody buyer they bring along with them and like, oh,
Mhm.
what kind of business are you looking for? And so it's also through our network. And again, it's just once we take that and then just it's through, our own legwork of calling, follow up with emails. But it's about the presentation. I truly believe uh, to the buyers.
Mhm.
Again, in my point of view, everyone's busy. I don't want to waste a buyer's time, my time, the seller's time. So it's back to what we spoke about earlier. Like I really kind of put it all out there. Here's the
Mhm.
state of the business. And any kind of hurdles I think we may have, I kind of put them out early. That
Mhm.
way, if they are one for the buyer, we move on to the next one and find a buyer who that's not so much of a hurdle or it's not an issue.
I think you hit on it, and it's kind of one of those unknown things that is really interesting right now in the industry. Buyer inquiries through the roof. Travis is not joking. On a weekly basis, we get hit up with buyers who are looking for something. Now, sometimes it's generic as I need a business in Dallas. Well, what does that mean? But a lot of times we actually have a laundry list of buyers with buyer mandates that said, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Here's the cash flow minimums I'm looking for. Here's the niches I'm looking for, all of that. And Travis and I and the whole team at Lion have a massive database that tracks those buyers, what they're looking for, and we know who's wanting to buy at what times, right? Like, some industries become hot afterwards, right? So post-COVID, service-based industries were hot, especially with the low interest rates. And so um, um, it's also a thing that's great. I mean, there's deal conferences. So there's conferences where Travis and I and the team go out to, and we're actually meeting with other buyers and private equity firms and reviewing deals. And so there is a lot of legwork that goes on in the background that a buyer or not a buyer, but that a seller never sees of us building up a buyer database years in advance of them even getting ready to sell their business so that we have that. And so, you hit on one thing when you were commenting on this, and we'll kind of wrap up with this, but presentation, right? So we didn't really dive into it, but does presentation matter in how you present that business to the buyer?
Yes, I think 100%. I mean, a buyer looks at something in the material that's very professionally well, done and put
Mhm.
together, is, appealing to the eye. You just naturally are going to think of that business. Even it goes down to the business that's a professional business,
Mhm.
again, because they've put out material. We work with them. We put the material together, do a big questionnaire and dig in with them. We put together some great material.
Mhm.
And, it's all electronic too. We can do, physical if we're at meetings like you're talking about, we
Mhm.
can take with us. But again, all electronic. So we can easily reach all these people we're talking about, emails, email blasts, things of that nature. So yeah, I think it truly, because I've, you see like a little one pager from
Mhm.
some that literally looks like it's put just on a Word document and dragged and drop and a picture here and a quick little blurb about it. Not to say it's a bad business underneath
Mhm.
it. It's just I'm, from a marketing standpoint, and like you said, a presentation standpoint, it's just not as appealing.
Yeah.
And, like you're saying, buyer inquiries are sky high and all they're doing is on the portals and stuff too. And if you have a one, they're just flipping through and they're going to, the one that catches their eye is most likely one that they're going to stop on, or, the several ones, but ones that are very eye appealing, they'll stop on those versus one that look a little more generic. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yep. Yeah, no, I clearly couldn't agree more with that. If you got a professional business that you spent the last 20 or 30 years building, get professional representation. Find someone, Lion, who is going to make you look better than all of the other companies like yourself that are out there. So, well, Travis, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been a blast talking about what buyers look for and deal structure and all of that. So thank you for coming on the show today. If someone who's listening wants to get a hold of you, Travis, how do they go about getting a hold of you?
Yeah, either email or phone. So email is just tstrack@lionbusinessbrokers.com. Our phone number is 682-350-8586.
Perfect. And then we will have Travis's information all listed on the website. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today and you want to keep the conversation going, be sure to connect with us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at the EXP Exchange or visit us on the website at expertexchange.pro. That's expertexchange.pro. For more resources and information related to today's show and to find more about Travis, you can reach out to him at lionbusinessbrokers.com. That's lionbusinessbrokers.com. Remember, success is a journey, and we're thrilled to be a part of yours. Thank you for joining us on the Expert Exchange.
All content on this show is information of a general nature and does not address the circumstances of any particular individual or entity. Nothing in this show constitutes professional or financial advice, nor does any information on the show constitute a comprehensive or complete statement of the matters discussed or the law relating thereto. The Expert Exchange is not a fiduciary by virtue of any person's use of or access to this content. You alone assume the sole responsibility of evaluating the merits and risks associated with the use of any information or content on the show before making any decisions based on such information. In exchange for using the content, you agree not to hold the Expert Exchange, its affiliates, or any third-party service provider liable for any possible claim for damages arising from any decision you make based on information or other content made available to you through the show. The Expert Exchange is not licensed to practice law or provide legal advice. Nothing contained within this show is intended to be an offer to either buy or sell securities.